Welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here because today we are fundamentally rethinking a concept that pretty much every organization relies on. If you look across the 2026 marketing discourse, everyone is telling brands the exact same thing. You need to become more authentic, you need to be more human, and you need to be deeply narrative-driven. But what if that widely accepted advice is actually flawed? Well, today, we're going to figure out why relying solely on traditional storytelling just isn't cutting it anymore in our highly unstable media environment, and more importantly, what organizations actually need to be doing instead. Okay, let's dive into this. The current discourse is constantly urging brands to be more creator-led and to simply, tell better stories. But we really have to ask ourselves, is that enough? The short answer is no, not at all. That framing completely understates the massive shift happening in the market right now. We're essentially asking storytelling to compensate for environments, technologies, and platforms that organizations literally do not control. So here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the storytelling myth. Second, platforms as infrastructure. Third, when narrative collapses. Fourth, the 3 rules of volatility. And finally, number 5, the intact organization. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the storytelling myth. We'll look at why a creative renaissance is actually a risk response. Right now, organizations are facing immense pressure to culturally compensate for instability they simply can't control. The popular interpretation of this is that audiences are just tired of polished AI-generating sameness, and so they just want better stories. But honestly, that's only half the picture. According to the TikTok for Business Next 2026 Trend Report, creators and audiences are moving way beyond impulse tactics. People aren't necessarily looking for Hollywood-level production quality or some gripping creative plotline. What they're actively looking for is verifiable evidence. They are asking for signals they can trust in an environment that just keeps shifting completely beneath their feet. What this actually reveals is a massive paradigm shift. Narrative is no longer just a creative advantage or a soft marketing tool. As culture, technology, and markets all converge under intense platform instability and institutional distrust, narrative is actually becoming a structural dependency. The story is now doing the heavy, load-bearing work that traditional business strategy used to do. It has to step up and create coherence where the surrounding systems no longer provide any. Moving right along to Section 2, platforms as infrastructure. TikTok is the signal, not the story. Let's see how this actually plays out in the real world by looking at the TikTok January 2026 U.S. ownership restructuring. This brilliantly illustrates the reality of modern platforms. Back in early 2026, TikTok finalized a majority American-owned U.S. joint venture to address national security concerns. The breakdown looked like this. ByteDance retained 19.9%, while Oracle, Silver Lake, and MGX each took 15% stakes. Now, this deal successfully resolved a regulatory standoff, sure, but it was doing so much more than that. It was simultaneously a real-time visibility story, a trust story, and a market story. It proves that platforms are not just neutral distribution channels for fun videos. They actively determine what is visible, who is credible, and exactly which stories are allowed to scale. To really drive home just how much market infrastructure a platform represents, consider this. According to a March 2026 SEC filing, Oracle's 15% stake alone was valued at roughly $2 billion. That massive valuation isn't just pricing in reach or engagement metrics. It is pricing in a structural position within a global visibility system. Platforms are narrative infrastructure, and holding a structural position within them has hard, undeniable financial value. Which brings us to Section 3, when narrative collapses. We're going to examine the cost of organizational hesitation. So what actually happens when you don't have that structural readiness? Well, looking back to a vivid 2023 case study, this number is pretty stark, 24.6%. According to Reuters data, Bud Light sales dropped 24.6% in the 4 weeks ending June 3, 2023, following a massive boycott. As a direct result, it lost its status as the top-selling U.S. beer. Now, brands survive controversy and polarized campaigns all the time, but this specific situation was uniquely revealing about the mechanics of modern narrative. You see, the deeper problem here wasn't merely the controversy itself, it was the organizational reaction. By hesitating, the organization confirmed the impression that no coherent internal position existed. The brand's narrative simply couldn't hold the organization together under the violent collision of cultural reaction, platform amplification, and intense market pressure.
It is a textbook example showing that when things get hot, your story has to do far more than just explain a marketing campaign. It has to demonstrate absolute internal coherence. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it introduces Section 4, 3 Rules of Volatility. Let's talk about navigating the new baseline risk. So what does this new baseline actually look like? Here are the 3 structural realities of modern business. Step 1. Narrative fragility is a baseline risk. Visibility can vanish instantly due to a simple platform policy or governance shift. Just look at Forrester's notes on the TikTok US restructuring, which pointed out the entire algorithm, moderation, and user experience would physically change. The systems shaping visibility are unstable variables, not constants. Step 2. Trust cycles have compressed dramatically. And Step 3, market feedback moves far faster than traditional strategic planning cycles. You simply can't just plan annually anymore when the market response happens in real time. The absolutely crucial point here is understanding this concept of compressed trust cycles. Audiences no longer evaluate you just on how consistent you are when the waters are calm. Trust is now built through interpretation. How quickly do you read a volatile moment? Do you respond coherently? The gap between what an organization says and how it actually behaves under pressure is immediately visible to everyone. And let me tell you, closing that gap after it opens is incredibly expensive. You have to prevent it from opening in the first place. Finally, we reach Section 5, the intact organization, building for structural readiness. How do we build for structural readiness and survive this systemic disorder? Well, the strongest organizations aren't just resilient, they learn through disorder. Here's their blueprint. First, they treat instability as the baseline, not some rare exception. They just assume the platforms will change. Second, anticipatory leaders model second-order narrative effects early. They run scenarios before they publish, asking things like, if this platform becomes controversial, does our story still hold up? And third, they align internal culture with external posture well before the pressure arrives. They embed storytelling directly into business strategy rather than just delegating it down the chain to the communications department. To achieve this, organizations desperately need a narrative literacy at the executive level. Leaders must be able to assess what a story is structurally doing for the organization rather than just looking at distribution metrics or reach, because platform reach absolutely does not equal brand strength. Internal coherence is now the primary driver of external trust. I really want you to let this powerful thesis from our source material sink in. The strongest story is not the one that travels fastest, it is the one that still holds when the system around it changes. Organizations that outperform in the future won't necessarily be the loudest or even the most culturally fluent. They will be the ones that invest in coherence over charisma. They will be the most intact. So I want to leave you with this provocative question to reflect on. Instead of asking your teams to just go out and tell a better story, ask yourself, what is your current story compensating for? Are you using narrative to paper over structural instability? Or is your organization truly structurally ready for the volatility ahead? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this gives you a sharper lens for the strategic environment we're all navigating today.